That ring. My mother had one exactly like it. Emma Larson, the 24-year-old waitress, exclaimed, her voice trembling but her eyes sharp as a blade. In the opulent Starlight restaurant in San Francisco, Emma's heart pounded, as if it might burst from her chest, as she faced millionaire Victor Hensley. The platinum ring adorned with a black pearl on his hand wasn't just jewelry, it was her mother's scar, a 30-year-old secret buried deep. Hensley froze, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Could a waitress bring down an empire? All right, my dear viewers, get ready for a story that will leave you in awe. Take a second to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment below to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see someone joining us from all corners of the world. Emma, 24 years old, had been working at the Starlight restaurant for 3 months. Not a long time, but enough for her to notice the unspoken rules of the place, and enough for her to memorize every detail about the special guest who sat at table number 9 every Friday evening, Victor Hensley. A man who always arrived alone, always demanded absolute perfection, and always carried a chilling aura that kept all the staff at a distance. Hensley never looked at anyone for more than a second, nor did he ever respond to unnecessary questions. For him, everything had to be in its place, on time, and up to standard, no more, no less. But tonight, things began to veer off that order. As Emma gently placed a glass of wine on the table and glanced at the glittering ring on Hensley's left hand, she left a seemingly innocuous remark. My mother said she was given a ring just like that by a very special man. Her voice was soft, steady, but the word special carried a thin layer of sarcasm sharp as a blade. Hensley flinched. The wine glass in his hand trembled, nearly slipping from his fingers. "What are you talking about?" he growled, his voice cracking, devoid of the usual terrifying calm. But Emma only calmly adjusted the wine tray, her face showing not a hint of wavering. That ring, a piece of jewelry that seemed merely a display of status, was a link between the past and the present. It had once belonged to Lily Larson, Emma's mother. In 1992, when Lily was 22, she had just lost her parents in an accident. In desperation, she scrambled to find work to support her younger brother. Hensley, then a rising young entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, hired Lily as his secretary. But soon after, he exploited her naivety and dire circumstances. The ring, worth over $200,000, wasn't a generous gift. It was a Tula price for silence. Because Lily had inadvertently discovered a brutal truth. Hensley had falsified documents, using legal maneuvers to seize land from Native American families in Nevada. Those lands later became the foundation for massive data centers, the source of the wealth and power Hensley now possessed. When Lily wanted to leave, to escape it all, Hensley wouldn't let her go quietly. He threatened to ruin her life and her brother's if she uttered a word. "You think you can stand against me?" he said, shoving the ring into her hand. "Keep it and keep your mouth shut." With no other choice, Lily left Silicon Valley. Carrying the ring and a lifetime of fear, she settled in a small town in Oregon, living quietly and in poverty. Alone, she raised Emma and her brother. No one knew the full extent of her past except for the ring and the somber look in her eyes whenever she gazed westward. Now, Emma stood before the man who had haunted her mother's life for 3 decades. And she didn't need to shout or make a scene. Just a single, soft sentence was enough to shake the carefully guarded facade of power Hensley had maintained for so long. The ring, once a symbol of control, was now becoming a living testament to a secret that could no longer be buried forever. Lily passed away exactly 18 months ago, succumbing to a heart condition she couldn't afford surgery for. In a gloomy afternoon at a public hospital in a small Oregon town, her heart stopped, leaving behind a chilling, prolonged silence in a room filled with the hum of ventilators. Her final days were a series of frail, exhausted moments, her eyes still gleaming with unrelenting worry, her parched lips moving faintly, unable to form clear words. But when Emma, her daughter, leaned down beside the hospital bed, That calloused hand still reached out, gripping Emma's tightly, as if afraid that letting go would mean losing her forever. In halting breaths, she whispered slowly, each word draining her remaining strength. "Don't let my pain be meaningless. The truth will find its way." Emma felt each faint pulsonate just of her mother's heart, but of a duty, a promise. From that moment, a resolute vow was etched into her soul. When Lily died, Emma stood by the grave covered in wildflowers at the edge of the cemetery, light rain falling as if washing away all traces. Clutching the ring her mother left behind, she bowed her head and swore she would make Victor Hensley's man who had pushed her mother to the brink pay. But not with hatred, with justice and truth, the light that would dispel the darkness he had built with money and power. She packed her belongings, leaving behind the quiet town filled with sad memories, and moved to San Francisco with only an old suitcase and copies of the documents her mother had left, papers exposing Hensley's shady land deals, lists of victims, accounts from the few survivors. She sought out the starlight and applied to work as a server where Hensley was a regular VIP, not by chance, but as part of a meticulously crafted plan born from a pain too deep to share. This was where she could get close to him, memorize his habits, observe his smallest reactions, and gradually bring the truth to light. For over a year, Emma played the part of an ordinary worker, donning the uniform, walking the floor, mixing drinks, serving wine, but in her mind were thousands of numbers, documents, names, places, and pieces of evidence. She meticulously eavesdropped on phone calls between Hensley and his trusted lawyer, noted every sign when he ordered an extra cocktail during late-night meetings with partners at another table, and focused on the fleeting hesitation in his eyes when a staff member casually mentioned Nevada or displayed a magazine about data center technology. In Emma's heart, the pain never faded, but she knew she couldn't let emotions guide her. Instead, she honed her patience, a professional smile never leaving her lips, a gentle demeanor while serving, but eyes always focused, memorizing every movement, every expression of Victor's end. She found ways to interact subtly, as if it were routine, small tasks, but in reality, she was secretly documenting on the sidelines times, lighting, guests, dishes, words, reactions, so that when the time came she could build an airtight case, undeniable enough to shatter the crimes buried beneath layers of power. Then came that night, a Friday like any other, but not ordinary for Emma. As she approached table number 9, placing the glass of red wine on the tray, she began with a soft but piercing remark. "Mr. Hensley, my mother always said some gifts carry stories that can't be forgotten." Victor paused, frozen as if suppressing a torrent of words. He furrowed his brow, his eyes fixed on the young server, someone he thought was just another nameless employee. A moment later, his voice came, strained but attempting calm. "You're mistaken. Don't bring this up again." Emma paused. Her smile wasn't one of surrender, it was calm, laced with intent. "Of course, sir," she said, giving a slight bow as she adjusted the tray. "But my mother, she could never forget. Neither can I." Under the soft, golden glow of the ceiling lights, Hensley's hand trembled as he held the wine glass, beads of moisture clinging to its rim. Emma saw it clearly. His fingers twitched, sweat visibly forming. The VIP guest was no longer the unshakable symbol of power. He knew the young woman before him wasn't just there to serve a table of wines, he was there to challenge, to question, to bring the truth into the open, something her mother had never been allowed to do. In that moment, Emma knew the ring, the cursed gift from the past, had become a marker of justice. And the battle hadn't begun with shouting or power, but with truth, the truth she had gathered second by second through every subtle expression, every recorded snippet, every page of evidence. Victor Hensley remained silent, his eyes filled with unease. Emma stepped back, her gaze steadfast, like a promise paving the way. In her heart was the vow her mother had entrusted that no matter how long it took, the truth would find its path. And she would make it happen not with vengeance, but with justice, with the belief that justice would triumph over the darkness of power and deceit. Victor Hensley remained silent, his eyes filled with unease. Emma stepped back, her gaze steadfast, like a promise paving the way. In her heart was the vow her mother had entrusted that no matter how long it took, the truth would find its path. And she would make it happen not with vengeance, but with justice, with the belief that justice would triumph over the darkness of power and deceit. In the 2 weeks following that fateful night at table number 9, the atmosphere around Emma shifted in a way only those who have confronted power could understand. It began with small details: a 2 a.m. anonymous phone call, a man's raspy, steel-cold voice. "You should be careful." Some stories shouldn't be retold. No click of the call ending, just a prolonged silence that seemed to challenge the listener's heart. Emma sat up in bed, her gaze unwavering. She had prepared for this. 3 nights later, a black SUV with no license plate began parking near the small apartment she rented in Oakland. No movement, no lights, but close enough to make one thing clear: she was being watched. Every morning when she left, she saw it. When she returned, it was still there, like a nameless shadow. At the Starlight, the pressure mounted in more subtle ways. The restaurant manager, who had previously barely noticed Emma, suddenly started checking her wine tray, counting the napkins she folded, evaluating how she interacted with customers. "Some VIP guests have complained that your attitude doesn't meet standards," he said, his tone even, but his eyes darted quickly toward table number 9. Emma only nodded, showing no reaction. She knew this was an indirect warning, and she also knew Hensley was pulling the strings from behind the scenes. But she didn't falter. She had been preparing for this for over a year. Every anonymous call, every appearance of the SUV was recorded by a small device hidden in her coat pocket. Every threat, every unusual change at work, all of it was meticulously collected, like pieces for a larger puzzle she was assembling. Then, one Monday afternoon, as Emma finished her shift, a man in a black suit entered the small cafe near the restaurant. He introduced himself as Hensley's lawyer, pulling a chair to sit across from her without invitation. "We can make an arrangement," he said, placing a thick envelope on the table. $75,000. This deal will end all your troubles." Emma looked at the envelope for a few seconds, then pushed it back toward him. "Are you trying to buy my silence?" she asked, her voice calm. The lawyer smirked, his expression a mix of pity and intimidation. "What do you want?" he countered, this time with the familiar arrogance of someone who thinks money can solve everything. Emma looked straight into his eyes. "I want my mother to rest in peace, and I want what Mr. Hensley stole returned to the people he destroyed." He didn't respond. He only stood, leaving a vague threat. "We hope you'll choose the wise path." But Hensley didn't stop there. 3 days later, he appeared himself for the first time, confronting Emma directly outside the restaurant. Dusk was settling, a light breeze blowing across the stone-paved sidewalk. A sleek black Tesla was parked at the curb. Hensley stepped out, impeccably dressed, but the tension on his face was clear under the streetlights. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice no longer the growl from before, but low, hoarse, carrying the exhaustion of a man who had always controlled everything and was now slowly losing that control. Emma didn't answer immediately. She let him feel that silence, like a mirror reflecting the very intimidation he had once used on others. Hensley pulled another envelope from his coat. $150,000. "You're just a waitress," he said sharply, trying to maintain his authority. "You think you can take me on?" Emma smiled, a cold, sharp smile she had rehearsed hundreds of times in the mirror, imagining this moment. "Mr. Hensley," she said slowly, her eyes never leaving his face, "my mother was just a secretary too, but the truth doesn't care about status." Hensley froze. He said nothing more, only stared at her for a moment before turning and getting into his car. But Emma knew whether he drove away, whether he continued his threats, the game had shifted, and he was losing. Because Emma wasn't fighting alone. She had the truth. She had evidence. And most importantly, she had the vow from her late mother burning steadfastly in her chest. Dear audience, take a moment to relax or grab a glass of water, then keep listening to the story. There are still surprising twists ahead. Comment 1 if you're loving the story so we know you're still with us. Emma had never thought she would face this battle alone. 6 months earlier, when her plan was still just blurry notes in an old notebook, she had reached out to Rachel Nuena, renowned prosecutor in San Francisco's legal circles, known for investigating major land fraud cases involving real estate conglomerates. In a small tea shop tucked in the heart of Chinatown, where red lanterns swayed in the afternoon breeze, Rachel fell silent when Emma mentioned her mother's name. She recounted meeting Lily Larson in 2015. Back then, Lily had come to the prosecutor's office with a thin folder, trembling and barely able to lift her head. Yet her eyes were filled with urgency. She had documents, testimonies, but soon after, Rachel lost contact with her. Lily had backed away, clearly intimidated. At the time, Victor Hensley was too powerful. His influence was everywhere, from land planning councils to private dinners with politicians. But now, Rachel said, her eyes sharp as a blade, things are different. From that day, Rachel became the silent guide behind Emma's steps. She taught her how to gather evidence legally, from using a mini recording device hidden in her coat to securing information and storing data safely without leaving a trace. Emma learned quickly. She knew she had no other choice. She had to be precise, cautious, and couldn't afford to make a mistake. But what Emma hadn't anticipated was the biggest turning point coming from Hensley's own family. One late night, while sitting in her small Oakland apartment, she received an email with a brief subject line. I know about Lily Larson. The sender, claire.h@greenhearth.org. Emma recognized the name immediately, Claire Hensley, Victor's only daughter, a well-known environmental activist who had appeared in numerous articles for renouncing her inheritance to protest her family's policies. In the email, Claire wrote that she had known the truth for a long time, that what her father had done to Native communities, to people like Lily, was something she could not forgive, and that she had evidence. They met on a Saturday morning in a small park in Berkeley. No one paid attention to the two women sitting on an old wooden bench under the shade of a red maple. Claire appeared simply, wearing a rough cloth coat and a dark knit cap, a far cry from the image of a tycoon's heiress. In her hand was a small USB drive. Claire explained that it contained internal company emails from Hensley's firm irrefutable evidence of him bribing Nevada state officials to seize land, signing illicit deals, and threatening employees who wanted to expose the truth. Claire didn't say much, only looked at Emma and said she was doing this not for revenge, but for conscience. Because she didn't want her son to grow up bearing the burden of his grandfather's sins. Emma took the USB, feeling clearly in her heart the shift of a battle nearing its end. She was no longer alone. Now by her side was a seasoned prosecutor, a woman who had been hurt by silence, and the very daughter of the man behind all the crimes. What her mother had once tried to do alone was now being carried forward by a chain of people daring to speak the truth. Emma understood that this was no longer just her journey. It was the voice of those who had been forced to step back, but were now rising not with noise, but with evidence, conscience, and a resolve to bring light back to a place that had been shrouded in darkness. The annual San Francisco charity auction was the city's most anticipated event of the year, where the most powerful people gathered not just to donate, but to flaunt their status. Under the crystal chandeliers and the long red carpet stretching from the Fairmont Hotel's lobby, over 400 guests arrived. Senators, CEOs of billion-dollar tech companies, and, of course, Victor Hensley, tycoon known for his dignified appearance and charitable rhetoric. As usual, Hensley reserved an entire table near the main stage. Dressed in a deep blue suit and an Italian silk tie, he sat amid polite laughter and the constant sweep of live stream cameras capturing his aging but still confident face. Aides whispered in his ear. Reporters from afar zoomed in to record his every move. For Hensley, tonight was a chance to reaffirm his stature as he had done every year. But for Emma, tonight was the final move in a chess game. She didn't enter the hall as a guest. She was part of the serving staff white dress shirt, simple black skirt, a tray of wine in hand, and eyes that went unnoticed. But beneath that calm exterior was a racing heartbeat and a mind calculating every second. Everything had been meticulously prepared. Emma arrived early, checking the small earpiece in her left ear, where Rachel Newen was connected from a surveillance room outside, alongside 3 FBI agents stationed at the entrances. Every step Emma took was a synchronized part of a plan nearly 2 years in the making. As the stage lighting shifted to a warm golden hue and the MC invited Victor Hensley to speak, the room settled into a formal hush. He stood, lightly adjusting the microphone, smiling at the crowd, a smile the press described as composed and full of conviction. He began with familiar words. "We have a responsibility to society, to the community. We must use our success to bring about something better." Emma was just a few steps away. She gently set down the wine tray, pulled a sealed black envelope from her pocket-tone, carefully prepared by Rachel, walked toward Hensley's table, where the spotlight shone brightest. Then, she placed the envelope on the table, just as he paused to take a breath before concluding his speech. The room's atmosphere dipped for a second. "Mr. Hensley," Emma spoke, her voice clear and steady, loud enough for the stage microphone to catch every word. "My mother sent you this gift. She said, 'It belongs to you.'" All eyes turned to the table. Cameras, phones, press lenses all swung toward where Emma stood. Hensley frowned, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He picked up the envelope, opening it under hundreds of gazes. And as the papers spilled out copies of internal emails, forged contracts, lists of families coerced into land transfers, the color drained from his face. "What the hell is this?" he roared, his voice choking. That was the moment Rachel stepped into the hall, her sharp eyes behind glasses reflecting no emotion. Beside her were 3 FBI agents in black suits, their faces resolute. The sound of their shoes echoed in the room, now silent as a cathedral. "Victor Hensley," Rachel declared, her voice ringing clearly through the microphone, "you are under arrest for financial fraud, bribery of public officials, and witness intimidation. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The cold clink of handcuffs pierced the stillness. Hensley shouted something, but the cameras captured every expression, the collapse of an empire that began with a ring and ended with an envelope. Within minutes, social media erupted. The hashtag number Hensley exposed shot to #1 trending on Twitter, live streams spreading like wildfire. On phone screens, Emma's face appeared alongside the FBI agents, with comments flooding in. "Who is she? The woman who exposed Hensley. A silent hero." But for Emma, that moment wasn't about fame. As she quietly left the hall, leaving behind the noise, flashing lights, and a barrage of calls from the media, only one thing remained in her heart: her mother, Lily Larson, could finally rest in peace. And the truth, buried for so many years, had found its light. The verdict was delivered in a packed courtroom, 20 years in prison for Victor Hensley, with no possibility of early parole. As the handcuffs tightened around his wrists, the room fell silent, broken only by the clatter of typing and the soft sighs of relief from those he had once harmed. His assets were frozen just days after the first hearing. The building once named Hensley Technologies was rebranded within a week. Corporations that had partnered with him scrambled to distance themselves, and his company collapsed under the unrelenting pressure of a wave of class-action lawsuits filed by Native American families. Claire Hensley, his only daughter, didn't turn her back on her father's legacy, but she didn't embrace it either. She took control of a portion of the assets not tied up in legal restrictions and used every cent to establish the Indigenous Community Justice Fund Foundation dedicated to covering legal costs, rebuilding land, and restoring environments in areas illegally exploited. This was Claire's way of making amends, not through reputation, but through tangible actions. Each grant, each rebuilt home, each person healed. But Emma's journey didn't end with legal victories. As the media spotlight dimmed and the hashtag number Hensley exposed faded from Twitter's top trends, Emma set out to build something more enduring than punishment, a path for healing. She founded the Lily Larson Foundation, named after her mother, as both a tribute and something more, a doorway for those who had been silenced. Within a year, the foundation supported over 50 families from Nevada to Arizona, regions scarred by Hensley's land grabs. Free legal programs, financial aid for whistleblowers, and community education workshops were rolled out one by one. But the foundation's most significant legacy was a piece of legislation, the Larson Act, which Emma was the first to champion. The Larson Act, passed by Congress after a nationwide media campaign, marked a major step forward in protecting witnesses and whistleblowers in the finance and real estate industries. It mandated that companies establish independent complaint mechanisms, banned all forms of internal retaliation, and provided legal protections for those exposing wrongdoing for the first time. Justice had a true shield for those daring to speak the truth. In the main lobby of the Lily Larson Foundation's headquarters in San Francisco, inside a simple but dignified glass frame, sits her mother's ring. The deep blue sapphire glimmers under soft lighting. Below it, a small bronze inscription reads, "The truth needs no power, only courage." It's not just a keepsake. It's a reminder, a symbol, where every story began and where all ended in hope. A year after Hensley's sentencing, Emma received a letter from the federal prison in Oregon, not from him, but from the prison warden. The letter was brief, simply stating that Hensley had requested to meet her. Emma didn't respond immediately. She took the letter to the small lake near her home, where her mother used to sit for hours every Sunday afternoon, and stayed silent for a long time. In the end, she decided to go. In the visiting room, a thick glass panel separated the two. Hensley sat on the other side, his face gaunt, his hair now stark white, his eyes stripped of the arrogance and power they once held. He said nothing as Emma entered, only watched in silence. She sat down, her hands resting lightly on the cold metal table. "I used to hate you," she began, her voice steadier than she expected. "I wanted you to suffer like my mother did. I wanted you to feel the fear, the helplessness she went through." She paused, taking a deep breath, her gaze never leaving him. "But my mother taught me that hatred is a prison. It traps you. I didn't come here for your apology. I came to let go." Hensley lowered his head. A single tear rolled down his cheek, the first time in his life, in front of someone he once deemed insignificant. "I'm sorry," he whispered, barely audible. Emma stood up. She said no more. She didn't need him to atone. She had reclaimed everything, not wealth, not fame, but freedom from the shadow he had cast over her and her mother's lives. As she stepped out of the prison, the sun was gentle. On her way back, she opened her phone and saw a message from a woman in Arizona. "Thank you. Because of your foundation, my daughter and I could keep our grandparents' land. I don't know how to say more than 2 words. Thank you." Emma smiled. For the first time in a long while, a smile free of pain, because she understood forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was a choice. And sometimes, forgiveness was the greatest victory.